Is it yourself and Kiona?
There's also Sam, one of the product owners, and I believe Natalie, one of the product owners, calling in, but they're eating, so they don't want to share their screen. This is the problem with the
Okay.
lunch meetup: is no one shares their screen because we're always usually
Everybody's
eating.
eating.
Yep,
Everybody's eating. Okay.
it's all good.
Well, all right. So I'll get started if that's okay. And please ask questions as I go through. So I think everybody knows me, but if not, I'm Dave Staggy, Agile Coach at CUNA Mutual Group. And I'm going to talk today about immersive learning. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll all have a better understanding of what it is. So as I go through this, ask questions as I go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, what is immersive learning, how it's being used in the industry, and then how we're starting to use it here at CUNA Mutual Group. And the reason that I'm late is that I'm actually in one of our first pilots on a 2-week immersive learning session that Sprint 1 just wrapped up on. So I'll talk about that a little bit as we go as well. So again, ask questions as I go through this. So what is an immersive learning environment? So it's a place for Agile teams to accelerate learning and focus on delivering a specific problem or challenge. So think of Agile teams in terms of like a Scrum team or a Kanban team. The thing I like to focus on in this statement is focus on delivering. So focus. So if you're a team that's struggling on focusing on a specific problem, or struggling on focusing on learning new skills, this environment is intended to help you to do that. So not only are you learning, but you're also focusing on delivering something into production. So it's not just about learning, it's also about delivering. So there's two main goals for this that I kind of talk through. So, delivering on your challenge at the bottom here, and then learning new skills. So every challenge comes with that. And so the other types of learnings that are out there, there's self-led learning, there's instructor-led learning. Self-led is kind of like you're going out on your own to learn whatever you're trying to learn. So internally here, we've got something like Pluralsight. You can go out, learn new technologies kind of at your own pace, at your own time. Instructor-led would be like going to a class, learning specific technology or whatnot from an instructor. The thing with the self-led, instructor-led, the thing that they have in common is a lot of times you're learning hypothetical situations or learning things that may or may not apply to your day-to-day work. The immersive learning is something that we're piloting here at CUNA within the IT Agile coaching team, and it's taking your team and putting them into an environment outside of their normal work environment. So you're not in your traditional team room, you're not in your normal cube space, you're in a different environment, and you're focusing on a specific challenge and also focusing on learning. With the immersive environment, it also comes with, Agile coaches are also involved with your team, and technology coaches based on the challenge you're trying to solve. And it's all done, by employees within your company. So, immersive learning is something you generally don't have contractors or consultants come in and help with. It's generally done within your company. And so some of the companies out there that are starting to practice this or have been practicing this, kind of listed here at the bottom. And a lot of this is grassroots. So this type of practice isn't coming out of, like academia. It's not coming out of, MBA type programs, for example. This is being done by practitioners to help solve specific problems. So last year I was able to spend some time at Target, and that's where I learned the most about this. And they're actually one of the main leaders in immersive learning. There's a conference actually coming up that they're helping to drive. So it is relatively new, but there's a lot of companies that are gravitating to this. So, Walmart, I've seen kind of pictures of their immersive learning environment. John Deere, Verizon, Principal, Capital One. And most of these companies are calling immersive learning environments dojos. John Deere is calling theirs a foundry. So there's no like industry standard or a set way that you have to call these environments. But companies are gravitating towards dojos. for their immersive learning environments. But they all stand for immersive learning environment. So here at CUNA Mutual Group, within the coaching team, we're actually calling ours the Team Accelerator. We just decided to make ours specific to CUNA Mutual Group. The other thing with immersive learning is it's heavily based on OKRs, or objectives and key results. So if you're not familiar with these, it is a practice to help get alignment and shared vision, not only within your team, but also across the company. So again, I was at Target last year. They use OKRs across their company to keep, everyone, kind of up to speed and in line with the shared vision of the company. So from CEO to the team to even individuals, OKRs are all connected together. And so within the immersive learning environments, you generally have the teams develop OKRs to talk about the technical challenge you're trying to solve and also their learning. So what's your objective? And then you come up with key results to say, how do we measure that we actually achieved our objective? So it's pretty simple, but it is a way to get everybody's buy-in to the challenge that you're trying to tackle. Any questions up to this point? I kind of went through that a little quick. Okay, so why do you want to do immersive learning, or why should you do it? So again, we talked through this a little bit, but it allows teams to focus on learning while tackling a specific goal. So again, a lot of trainings use hypothetical situations that you may or may not be able to apply to your normal day-to-day work. Immersive learning is for your team. It's your backlog. It's your challenge. So you're going into this. You're going into this with your challenge that you came up with. So it's your experience. It's not the coach's experience. It's not the tech coach's experience. It's the team's experience and what they want to get out of it. So what it is it allows the team again to focus on their products and their customers. They get to learn a little bit more about agile practices, level up their skills, and learn collectively as a team. So in the environment that we're starting to do here at CUNA, we're doing a lot of mob programming. So the team collectively learns together. It's not, everybody take their own PBI and try to get something done. It's you pull one PBI in progress and the entire team focuses on that together to get it done. And then you pull the next PBI in, everybody focuses on that. When it's done, then you pull the next one in. So there's not assigning PBIs or user stories to individuals. The user story or PBI is assigned to the team. So some of how we are trying to do this here and how other companies, kind of operationalize immersive learning is that they prioritize the teams that are interested in these challenges based on IT or corporate strategy. So we've started to build up a backlog here of teams that are interested in immersive learning challenges. And, as it gets bigger, we'll have to prioritize that or order that based on, the challenges that they're asking for and if they align to IT or corporate strategy. And that'll help us to prioritize the teams that are coming into these environments. So this when here is a little bit more specific to CUNA Mutual Group, but we have a partnership between the Agile coaching team and our application architecture practice. Because again, the immersive learning is heavy technology and also agile. So to have the two areas partner has been a really good thing because we can make sure we are building up tech coaches as well along the way. Yeah, and so I guess at the bottom here, I'm just kind of mentioning mainly for far reach at this point, we're kind of aligning this to moving to the cloud and pursuit of agility as our two big kind of objectives. So we've got a couple different offerings that go through that are part of immersive learning. There's a couple more that are outside of this slide here, but I just wanted to focus on a couple. So what we're currently piloting that started this week is the top one here, which is a 2+ week challenge. So this is where the team is in a dedicated space for 2 weeks. And so that's where, again, other companies are kind of calling it Dojo or Foundry. So what this is we're doing 2 sprints per week. So this team is doing 4 sprints in 2 weeks. And the reason we're doing that is it increases feedback loops amongst the team. So you have more retros, you got 4 retros, you have 4 sprint reviews, 4 sprint plannings. So, you get more interaction with your customers and stakeholders, but the team also gets more time to kind of step back and talk about what's working and what's not and make adjustments along the way. And then we're also using mob programming the entire time. So like yesterday, for example, the day started off with a daily scrum. We did that. I think it lasted 10 minutes. The rest of the day, the team got to work. And they did that using mob programming. So part of this too is
programming. Is that when there's the multiple working on a user story together?
Yeah, so mob programming, so the way that you do that is you have one machine called the driver that the person is entering code into. You have another machine that is the navigator or researcher, and that's the person if the team has questions on the code that they're building, that person could do Google searches, could read through documentation, whatnot, and try to help the driver figure out, what code to type in, for example. So if you have a team of 9 people, you only have one computer that's being used to type the code in. And then you rotate ever so often. So this team here is doing 5-minute rotations. So every 5 minutes, the driver changes to a new driver, the navigator changes to a new navigator.
How long typically would someone be mob programming?
We did it for the full day yesterday and the day before.
Okay. So and you kept rotating every 5 minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
And then every half hour, I think they started off every 25 minutes, but then it went to every half hour, they took a 10-minute break. Then they'd come back and then they'd start it again. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question?
Yeah. Oh, if you haven't done mob programming before and you're just trying it out, like you might do it for an hour and a half or something.
Yeah. So we've done. I think the question is, yeah, we've tried it out for different teams just to give them a taste, just for like an hour or two, just to see if they liked it. So we could do that as well. But within the immersive learning, we're really trying to do this the entire time because that way the team learns at the same pace. So you don't have somebody kind of off, learning something, then having to come back and train somebody. We really don't want to do training in these sessions. We want everybody to learn collectively from each other. But yes, you could do mob programming at an hour increment or 2-hour increment within your team. But within this environment, we're doing it the whole time. Now we may do some pairing as well. So we could break out and say, hey, let's just have a couple people pair on a PBI, another group of people pair on another PBI. We could do that as well. But for this challenge up to this point, it's just been using mob programming.
Hi guys, this is Vanessa. I'm one of Dave's colleagues at CUNA Mutual Group. I just wanted to add to that, as people are coming in, either the 2-day flex build or the team accelerator, one of the things that I think Dave has been really good about doing is to just preface it by saying like, hey, I know this is different. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel awkward at first, but just like, let's give it a chance and we can kind of adjust as we go, but please kind of go into this with an open mind. And people really have, and they seem to get into it really quickly. So it sounds kind of crazy at first, but we've had really good results with it.
Did that answer your question, Angie?
It wasn't my question, but I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Natalie.
Well, it's Natalie. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. I am curious about other things you've tried, but I don't want to jump ahead, so I can hold that question I've written.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So mob programming seems like maybe something we could do on our internal work, but we do client-based work, and that'd be a real hard sell sometimes to clients without proving it out first to pay for, 4 or 5 developers. However, is there a limit to the room, like mob size?
Well, right now we're doing a mob of 9+ people.
Well, that would.
There was concerns that was going to be too big, but that concern doesn't seem to be there anymore.
Awesome.
Everybody's able to stay focused on the task at hand. And because you do 5-minute rotations, if you're not paying attention and you land on the keyboard, it's going to be pretty obvious that you weren't paying attention. So everybody is really engaged into what's going on. And if people are starting to drift, you could say, well, let's do 4-minute rotations. And that's where you can start reducing that time. But 5 minutes seems to be working well for the team in this room.
So have you done other things other than mob programming with this immersive learning?
We've done pairing.
Pairing, okay.
So very similar, except you're just using 2 people rotating on the keyboard. Yeah.
And just for, if you're doing, I'm curious about how clients would take, obviously, like, yeah, you probably want to prove it out on your own internal things before you start working with outside consultants to do this. But, I think, so from what we've seen so far, because people are allowed to really focus on a challenge, and everyone's focused on that one thing, it seems like so far people are actually being able to accomplish more, or kind of get to their goals a little bit faster. And I would say, a client necessarily doesn't care how the sausage is made. They just want the sausage, right? And if they get more sausage, they're even happier. So, yeah, I mean, I would definitely, test it out internally and kind of see what your results are, and go for it.
Yeah, like we were saying, I mean, you could take just an hour and give it a try. And if at the end of that hour it's a complete disaster and nobody likes it, or you didn't see the value, then you can talk about that and go back to the way you used to work. So
I did like the 2 sprints per week, just the feedback loop, like increasing that within this experiment would be really insightful, I think. It's a good idea.
Yep. Yeah, especially like you have clients. I mean, if you can get them engaged twice a week to see what's being developed, you'd be able to course correct much quicker if there was an issue with what was being developed compared to what the customer thought they were going to be getting. Any more questions on that, Angie? Or Far Reach? Okay. So that was the 2+ week challenge. The other thing we've been doing too are called flash builds. And this is a much more intense paced immersive learning environment. So the team accelerator, I'd say, is more of a steady pace. So people seem to like the pace up to this point. You don't feel like you're kind of in a rush. You have time to actually sit back and learn, which is why one of the OKRs for the above one here is, what would you like to learn, basically. So a flash build is more, it's, I won't go any more than 2 days. I think some places I've tried 3, but 2 days seems to be about as much as you want to go, at least in our experience here. So we've been trying these out since December of last year, and it's 2 sprints a day. And it's really, we're calling it kind of a hackathon plus Scrum. So it's a team, kind of has a general idea of what they're trying to build. And then we add Scrum to that, so there's some structure to it. So again, now you have 2 retros a day, 2 sprint reviews a day, if that works out. Just the feedback loops are much increased even more than the 2+ week challenge. But it is a very fast-paced environment. Teams are focused for those 2 days, but at the end of it, from what I've seen, they're pretty exhausted, and they really don't want to go much beyond that. A lot of work does get done. So if I think the retirement space, one of the teams that we worked with here, they brought in a feature that normally would have taken them a couple sprints, and they're able to get it done in 2 days. But again, at the end, they were exhausted. So it is a much more intense-paced environment compared to the 2+ week challenge that we talked about earlier. But if teams are interested, or if it's hard to say, hey, we're going to invest 2 weeks into something, but we do want to try to do something a little bit different, the flash build might be a good first step, because it's, you might be able to easily buy into a 1 or 2 day challenge over like a 2-week challenge.
When
But-
you, sorry, if
No, go
you
ahead.
are looking at a flash build doing that, do you identify like a really challenging thing that people aren't, like, you think would, do you look for the perfect thing to do during that time, or do you just do what's next for that flash build?
Yeah, so that's actually, I think the next slide kind of gets into the process on leading up to these events. So we have a consult session where we talk through what they're trying to achieve. And because we are using OKRs, they're generally kind of a stretch goal. So they may or may not complete that at the end of the flash build. And because it's, these teams are working in a different way, it's hard to really even estimate what they can or cannot get done, because it is such a different way to work. But OKR is just the nature of them, is that it's a stretch goal. So the one working on now is they're trying to build out 2 microservices in the cloud. They have no idea if they can do that or not within a 2-week time frame, but that's what we're going to try to do. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
There we go. So this is a little bit more of the process and how this works leading up to these challenges. So what we have is an initial kind of intake process. So this is where people, if you're interested in doing a challenge, this is kind of a fancy word for talk. As of this point at CUNA, it's talk to myself or Vanessa. Where'd your dog go, by the way? Ran off there?
She's here.
Okay.
Down now.
I just happened to see that corner of my eye. There's a dog on my screen. So anyway, the intake is just kind of that initial conversation. What's the challenge that you're, or the problem you're trying to solve, and then if it sounds like a good candidate, just on that initial conversation, then we set up this consult process. And this is the process where we're trying to get, we want to get the team involved, we want to get architects involved, managers involved, product owners involved. Anybody who is interested in that challenge should be in this consult session to make sure everybody's on the same page on what they're trying to achieve. Because again, a 2-week challenge is a pretty big investment. So if there's folks who are not on board with it or have the ability to block it, you'd want to make sure they're in that consult session. And this, again, is very new to us. We're piloting this, so there has been a couple times where we've missed some folks, and you just kind of have to circle back and work through that. So, but again, we're just trying to get everybody involved that could potentially have some kind of interest in the challenge, or again, could even block it, and make sure we have the right conversations. So that consult, you build out your OKRs. So what's your objectives? Think through those, get alignment on them. If there is alignment, then we work towards, okay, what are the dates of the challenge? So when would the team like to do this? If it's a flash build, we'd line up the 2 days, make sure everybody's clear in their calendars. If it's, a 2+ week challenge, same thing. We'd line up the calendars and make sure everybody's, clear in their calendar. If one of these challenges is not for the team, then there's other things we could do. So we talked about self-led, we talked about instructor-led. So, maybe Pluralsight would actually get your team to where it needs to be. Or some other self-led training tool that maybe the developer could go to. Or maybe there's a class that the team could go to that would solve their problem. So it doesn't mean they always have to go into one of these immersive learning environments to solve the problem that they're trying to solve. So we make sure we talk through that too. The next slide here gets a little bit more into the operations of a 2+ week challenge. So we'll talk through that a little bit more in the next slide. But then at the end of the challenge, we do an exit process. So what this is for the challenge like we're doing right now, which is 2 weeks, we start off with what's called like a chartering process. It's really just kind of a foundational process. So, making sure everybody gets up their hopes, concerns, challenge, or questions, what types of things do you want to get out of this challenge? What are your concerns about this challenge? And have a good conversation around that. Then we also talk about the skills that they want to learn. So we build out like a skills matrix. What skills are you trying to learn in this challenge? How do you rank yourself? Are you low, high? And then at the end of the challenge, we would kind of re-baseline all those numbers and see if people, improve their skills or not. We also do user story mapping as part of the chartering process. So, it is a very lo-fi environment, so we're not using, like a Jira type system or a Microsoft system to track the user stories or PBIs. Everything's done on sticky notes, whiteboards. So I don't know if you can see the room. Actually, behind me is kind
Yeah, I was just
of.
gonna say, show the user.
This is the user story map for this current challenge over here. So it's pretty long. So we took. It's kind of hard to see actually, but we kind of built out the pipeline of what's the customer's journey. So we understood that, and then we figured out what's all the work that we need to do to make sure we're giving the customer what they want. So in this case, this challenge, the customer's developers. So that got a little confusing because we're trying to figure out how a developer would use the software that the developers are developing. But in some cases, your customer could be like a client at far reach, or a CUNA could be a policyholder, for example. So we go through all of that, set the foundation for the entire challenge, and then we're ready to do sprint 1 planning. So we did the chartering process actually last Friday for this challenge, and then we started the sprint 1 planning this past Wednesday morning. So we did it a little bit different. We did the chartering kind of outside of the challenge, which seemed to work fine. And then we lined up the tech coaches, agile coaches, to make sure the team had the skills they needed to get through their challenge.
Dave? Is
Yes?
there any time in this process flow that you would say it really doesn't make sense to continue to move forward with this process? Like there's something that would say, we thought it was a good idea, but now we're finding it's not, and we'd try something different?
Yeah, and this consult, Lisa, is where a lot of that has come out of. And we've actually had a few consults, Vanessa and I, where it just kind of ended because the team wasn't even on the same page on the challenge that they were trying to solve. Or, maybe some of the folks around the team weren't on the same page. So a lot of this stuff, or challenges and ideas that come out of this intake actually kind of die out in this consult process. So we've seen more consults kind of die out than actually end up in a challenge. And that's mainly because of alignment.
Yeah, so I think that's,
Yep.
Of course, you could be in a challenge and have it be like, wow, this thing just completely blew up. Doesn't make sense to keep going. But you would hopefully kind of flesh all those things out during the consult process. I think the coach at Target mentioned that they did have one challenge that kind of fizzled, but I think it was because everybody wasn't on the same page. I think it was like the manager was like, my team has to go through this, and the team kind of wasn't bought in on it. But again, hopefully those things will kind of be fleshed out ahead of time.
Yeah, and that is a good point, though. I mean, this is for the team, so we're not forcing people into these challenges. It should be the team saying, hey, this is something that would really help us out to solve whatever we're trying to solve. So, if people are getting kind of forced into the challenge, that's not a good thing. And to what Vanessa was kind of talking through. That answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So the one thing that, so the other thing with the challenge too is we're setting up different environments from where your team is in. So I mentioned that earlier. So you're not working within your normal working space. So the room that I'm kind of showing here, I'm going to spin around here a little bit. So this is the main screen here that they're writing the code on. And then all the developers kind of sit at the table here in front of that. And so that's where they're at for the 2 weeks. So at the end of the challenge, at the end of this is why it kind of shows normal work environment here. We want the team to then after the challenge is done, they go back to their normal working environment. So we do have separate environments set up for teams to go to. Right now, at CUNA, I'm kind of booking conference rooms in Waverly and Madison. Vanessa got a room dedicated for challenges there. So that's just something we're working through right now. But I highly encourage these to be outside of your normal work environment.
So I have a question, and it might be a little specific, but you have remote workers, right?
Yep.
So do they still stay remote, or do you encourage them to like come be with you during this immersive process?
We encourage them to be in the room with the team, but obviously that doesn't always work that way, right? So we did a flash build a couple weeks ago where the offshore team actually changed their schedule to work during onshore hours, and they were on the phone while their teammates were in the room, and that actually seemed to work really well. So based on kind of the technology we had, we used Microsoft Teams. So the driver had their screen shared, so the offshore team could see the code, and so could the onshore team. We then also kind of split off and said, all right, the offshore team's going to do mob programming, and the onshore team's going to be doing mob programming as well. So we kind of split up PBIs or user stories that way as well. So the offshore team took a PBI, onshore team took a PBI, but they were in constant, communication throughout the day. So that seemed to work well, but preferably we like to have people in the same room together, just to increase that communication and collaboration.
Yeah, and if you do have to be separate like that in separate locations, I would highly recommend then having video on all the time, in both directions if possible, just to kind of increase the feeling of, we're all kind of doing this challenge together. And then it was also useful because the offshore team could keep an eye on the the backlog and on our whiteboard and things like that. So it worked out pretty well that way.
Yeah.
Dave, if you have to do that again where you have a split situation, I know when we tried that mobbing before in customer care, we used Teams, but then we had problems with driving somebody else's computer through Teams.
Yeah.
We've used LiveShare over the past couple of weeks, and that's a lot more effective than trying to write code through Teams.
Nice. That's good. Good to hear. So yeah, I mean, it's just finding the tools that work, so people can still be in constant communication, even if you're in a different location, which isn't always easy. But kind of the first challenges that Vanessa and I are trying to tee up would be everybody's located, within the same location, just to try to get some good success stories out of these right away. So we don't have to work through the communication across sites or, between offshore and onshore. Although the retirement one did work out really well.
Yeah. Our two main locations are about 3.5 some hours apart. So we try to get, the people either in our Madison location to come to Waverly or vice versa, so far.
Yep. And so then, kind of going back to the process here, once people go back to their normal work environment, we don't plan on doing a ton of follow-up with teams. Right away when we get this started, we might just to see how things are going after the challenge. But really, again, this challenge is for your team. You came into this challenge because it was something your team wanted to do. It wasn't us pulling you into this. So when you went back to your normal work environment, hopefully out of the challenge, you achieved your objectives and you're able to take that back to your normal work environment. And if there are additional challenges that you'd want to take on in your normal work environment, you would then kind of go back through the intake process and start it over again. So this is, the basic flow that we're trying to establish within the coaching team. This shows a little bit of a schedule here and what this kind of looks like within the 2+ week challenge. So again, we're doing 2 sprints in a week. So calling them hyper sprints here, call them accelerated sprints, whatever you want to call it. But it's we're not doing a sprint a week or a sprint in 2 weeks. We're doing 2 sprints a week. And so with the team having their calendar cleared, this schedule is actually shifted a little bit. The team that we're doing right now, they started their sprint planning on Wednesday, but they came in, we did sprint planning for 45 minutes, and then they worked the rest of the day. And actually this schedule down here is what they're doing. So they decided they're going to work 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we did sprint planning at 9, and they ended their workday at 4 p.m. So if they have one-on-ones or other types of things that they want to do, they could do that before 9 o'clock or after 4 p.m. But during those core working hours, the team is dedicated to, you're dedicated to your teammates and the challenge at hand. And then so the next day, you'd have a daily scrum, 15-minute time box, and then you work the rest of the day. So a lot of work and a lot of focus time happens during these challenges. So as an example down here, let's say the team works 9 to 4. You do an hour lunch. That gives you 6 hours a day to work on your challenge. So your learning objective and your technical objective. So in this example on Monday, you'd get 5 hours and 15 minutes of working time with your teammates. On Tuesday, you get 5 hours and 45 minutes of work time. And if you're doing mob programming, you're rotating every 5 minutes during that time. So there's a lot of focus time on the task at hand. I kind of mentioned this earlier. The team's also just doing 1 PBI at a time. So it's not like, this is a team of 9 that we're doing right now. They're not working on 9 PBIs at a time. And the reason you don't want to do that is we have tech coaches in here. If we have 9 people working on 9 different PBIs and everybody has a question to the tech coach becomes a bottleneck. If you do mob programming where everybody's focused on 1 PBI, the tech coach now becomes the solution. So that's one of the big reasons why you just do 1 PBI at a time. And it seems slower at first. It seems very counterintuitive. But everyone agrees on when the work is done and when you can move on to the next thing. And everybody's learning at the same pace. Any questions on, I guess, this slide here?
Dave, when you say everybody's learning at the same pace, how do you deal with different skill levels coming in? And, like, let's say the driver, for instance, just knows exactly what to type and they just dump it all out of the navigator, doesn't really give any advice. But somebody's there, they're a quiet type of person and they're not going to speak up if they don't know what's going on. Does that solve itself, or do you have to do something to handle the fact that people learn at different paces?
Well, you just got to make sure. Yeah, I mean, that's part of this too, is respecting your teammates. And if somebody has a question and they bring it up, you need to slow down and make sure everyone's coming along at the same pace. And that's happening really well here in the one we're doing in the B1 room. If people have questions, they're bringing it up. You've got folks who really didn't know anything about what they're trying to do, and you got some folks who are have played around with this a little bit. So you really just have to make sure you're being vocal. And I've seen that happen here. So I think that's some of the job of myself and Vanessa, or even the tech coach, to say, hey, is everybody understanding what's going on here? If it looks like people are kind of drifting or not following along. So that's just something you have to kind of gauge as you go. But hopefully if you are a developer and you're not understanding what's going on, you're bringing that up. And it'll be clear, right, once you get to the driving machine. If you're not following, it'll be pretty evident. And that's maybe when the team needs to kind of rally together to say, hey, we got some of us that are going faster than the other folks, and we need to slow down a little bit. So this isn't about just going as fast as you can. The flash build, in a lot of cases, is about going as fast as you can. But this type of challenge is about going at a good pace where everybody can learn together. So, that's kind of where the accelerator part comes in, is when this challenge is over, you've now got a lot of people who just all learn the same skills at the same pace and can carry that forward. So it's not because it's called a team accelerator, you're just going as fast as you can for the 2 weeks. You could actually be going a little bit slower to make sure people are learning, and that's okay.
Yeah, and something else that we kind of added in, and I can't remember if you mentioned this, Dave, we actually allowed a third computer to be used for taking notes, because in the last flash build, some of the feedback one of the developers had was that he actually missed something along the way, and he was, had wished that he had a computer to take some notes on. So then we were like, that's not a bad idea to allow a third computer. So they are also rotating a note-taking position too. So that's kind of nice for people who are either a little more quiet or, some people learn by, like, let me read these instructions and try it later. So we are also doing that as they're rotating through those other positions as well.
Yeah. And that's another reason too why we have so many feedback loops here too. So hopefully that stuff is coming out. I'm not keeping up. I can't follow what's happening. So the team can kind of come together and figure out how to handle this. To keep going with what Vanessa was saying, we've got a couple folks who are going to be out some of the days. So one of the conversations we had is, if I'm out of the office, how do I jump back in and know what you guys did? And that's the note-taking piece that Vanessa was talking about. So we've got somebody who's taking notes. So when you come back in, okay, what did you guys all do yesterday? All right, you're not going to be 100% to where they were, but you can at least read through the notes and figure out, the big stuff that they accomplished or worked on. So rely heavily on the team to make sure you're pulling everybody along at the same pace. Any other questions on this slide? I think we're doing well on time.
I think this slide is really effective if you need to sell this to management, because this is one of the only opportunities that a team will ever have this much focused time to just work on something. We're taking all those other meetings, we're waiting time, hand time, all that kind of like cost of business, that loss of productivity in your normal workday just eliminates that. So it's really, like, give me another example of when a team could have 5 hours and 40 minutes of focused working time during the day. So this is a good slide for kind of selling that.
Right. I think that might have been my last slide. Okay, it was. One other thing, I'm going to go back if I can figure out how to do that. Some of the other use cases to this too is we've been focusing a lot on teams going into this. There may be a case where there's a problem that no one team can solve on their own. So, and we actually did some of this in a flash build, but you can bring multiple teams together to say, hey, we want to tackle this challenge, and basically by bringing multiple teams together, you would be eliminating all of the dependencies or wait times between them. So that's another use case for this as well. Is, again, if there's a big challenge that no one team can handle, you're depending on other teams. We can kind of line that up within that consult session and see if we can get a challenge going with more than one team working together to solve a common goal.
Have you ever found where, so the feedback loops are so much faster. So if you get to like the end of your first sprint and you're providing or showing what you've done, and you're waiting to get feedback from the stakeholders, clients, whatever, have you ever been blocked at that point by them? And then has that affected how this works? Like, have you been blocked by the stakeholder or the client ever?
Up to this point, no, we've always kept going. But again, we've generally worked in that alignment up front in the consult sessions to avoid what you just said. Are we going to run into that at some point? Probably, but we haven't yet. But again, and that's because we're trying to do those consults, so we make sure we get everybody on the same page. And the retirement example that we were throwing out had a lot of people involved in that. Those were really big consult sessions with a lot of people interested. So, if one of those folks weren't on board, we'd make sure we talk through it.
Yeah, and the kind of cool thing is that if you did get blocked, you're getting blocked after 2 days versus 2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
which is totally possible in either
Yep.
scenario, but at least you're finding out kind of sooner rather than later. Hey, let's see what we need to fix or adjust or whatever in order to keep moving through this.
So you've showed 2-week challenge and then I don't remember the name of the other flash build.
The flash build, yeah.
Is there one in the middle, like for a day sprint at all? Like, can you make these whatever you think would be best for the team?
Yeah, this is just what we have done here. I mean, you can adjust this to what makes sense to your company. I mean, you could do a 1-day flash build. So it'd be 2 sprints in 1 day.
And actually with the flash builds, we kind of give them the option, like, hey, at the end of the first day, do you guys want to keep going? Because so far, I think most of the teams have accomplished what we're aiming to do on the first day. And then there's some stretch goals, maybe some stretch OKRs. So then we're like, hey, do you want to keep this up for another day? And they're, they all said, yeah, let's go for another day. So it's kind of nice. Like if people want to test the waters, you can say, hey, can we commit to 1 day and leave the second day as an option? And I think that's sometimes easier for people to kind of get on board with too. So.
Yep. Yeah, and the one we did also, they had a 3rd day as an optional day. So they said, hey, we'll do a 2-day flash build. We'll leave Friday open in case we want it, and we just ended it at 2 days. So it's, again, this is up to the team and kind of how far they want to take this. So, if you want to try this out for a day, you could easily do like a flash build, maybe even do a 1-day sprint instead of 2 sprints in 1 day, if that's easier to sell or work through. Any other questions? That was everything I had in here. And again, we're still piloting this here at CUNY Mutual Group, so we're by far no experts on this. Companies like Target have been doing this for a few years now. So they actually have entire floors of their building dedicated to teams coming in and doing these types of challenges. So right now, it's Vanessa and I working on this. So we have a WIP limit of 1 in Waverly and 1 in Madison. Target, for example, I think they've got 20 coaches, 20 or 30, something like that. They can run in parallel. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And they just like, the rest of us, they started off just doing, flash builds, I think. So they kind of grew it from there. So.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Definitely something to bring up to the team to try.
Cool.
Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any other questions on the phone? All right. Well, that's all I had.
All right. Just a couple housekeeping things because I didn't do this last time. But are there any Agile things happening in the community or coming up, like conferences, those kinds of things that would be beneficial for the group to know? Besides the Agile meetup in May, of course.
What's the topic for that one?
So it's Amanda, and I believe it was either Scrum with Kanban or Intro to Kanban, however you correctly say that. I believe that's what it was, but she isn't there today, right? So watch Facebook. It'll be on there.
Right, Amanda is out today.
So we also have lots of openings for the rest of the year to speak at the Agile meetup, if there's anyone who would like to do so.
I'm always game for it, but I can't be me every time.
No, you can't.
I think one thing would be good would be to market this a little bit too, though. How do we get more companies engaged in this?
I don't know if you have reached out to him yet, but Chad Beyer is always interested in speaking at meetups and stuff, and so he might be interested in throwing his hat in for a topic?
Can someone connect me with him?
Sure.
Be awesome. So no other conferences or things coming up outside of this? You sit there and talk to us, right? All right. Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone,
thanks,
for
Angie.
joining.
Thanks.
All right. See you later.